let's use a business looking at strategy development for procurement within a project or a program life cycle. Actually, the reason to do the strategy is to make sure that you set out the relevant parameters to be able to move it forward into that delivery stage. And really, that means that the delivery is at the heart of the strategy. Remove some of said challenges or risks by approaching it in a certain way, advancing discussions, engagements, buying a service or a contract earlier to give you further information and maturity of content and material that will give you the informed decision and how you manage risk. So for me, it's around managing those internal and external interfaces, managing the messages, managing the communications, and then coming up with solutions to be able to manage those throughout the process. So manage. I think it's all about the way we approach and the way that we manage these different areas.
Here to inspire the world, and today we are having Jade. How are you?
Very good. Thank you so much for having me, Majeed.
Nice meeting you. I know that you are having back-to-back meeting. You are busy with the conference today, but I just pick you up
Yes.
to this because we need to gain from your knowledge, from your experience, and this is the purpose of our channel. So we are translating the messages, the word to the audience by motivating them, by inspiring them. So today we are here to talk about procurement strategy. Once we say strategy, something intangible, we cannot touch it, and we need to simplify it to the audience.
Yes.
So
most certainly.
Yes. So what's the procurement strategy?
So procurement strategy for me really is about how you approach a challenge, a topic, an item, a need, a requirement of a business, and how you translate that into procurement tangible deliverables.
Yes.
So I like to think that when I'm looking at procurement strategies, we break things down. So what is the scope? What are the requirements? What is the timeframes? What are the cost drivers? What are the qualitative elements that will then support you in order to frame what it is that you're buying? So quality, for example, could be anything in terms of how you look to achieve certain design aspirations, how you achieve certain products within that qualitative environment, how you achieve the customer satisfaction of a building or a development. So I like to think that the procurement strategy is really about two things. One is, what is the scope of requirements? And two is, how do you put the right contract around that requirement?
Okay, this is good. So the first thing, you need to identify that in the scope.
Yeah,
and then put it in the contract. But this is on project level, only one project. You will work on procurement strategy. What about overall?
An organization's requirements, again, we go back to what is the organization delivering? What are their vision objectives? How do you translate the vision and objectives, the spend of the organization, and how do you manage it? Best practice principles. So if I was to roll it up at organization level, I would say, what are the needs of the organization and how do I achieve those needs? And I would put time frames around it. I would have budget elements around it. And the quality would be, what am I looking to achieve from that? You know, what are the physical, tangible things I need to buy to deliver? And then again, you know, it's make or buy decisions. It's, am I going to deliver this in-house? Am I going to insource or am I going to outsource? How am I actually going to deliver these requirements? Who are going to deliver the requirements? So, you know, drawing on the supply chain. Who are your supply chain? Where do they sit? What power influence do you have over the supply chain? And then what are your recommendations of contracting? So how do you actually then put contracts in place? How do you manage them? How do you track them? How do you monitor? And then most importantly, how do you sustain relationships with that supply chain so that you deliver successful outcomes?
Okay, and can we give a specific example to the audience?
Yeah, I think if I was going to take, I've worked. Let me give two different examples for you. One if I was the client, and one if I'm the consultant. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So just play into those. From a client, obviously working in a client organization is very different to the consultancy space. So for a client, you're looking at that whole spend. Yeah, you're looking at what do I need and how does it align to that corporate procurement function? What does excellence mean? What does best practice mean? If I was to use an example there, how do we maintain buildings, for example? So not just develop buildings, but how do we maintain buildings for the longevity of that life cycle?
Yes.
So facilities management. How do I procure a facilities management contract, repairs and maintenance? So again, the strategy would be look at where are my buildings, where are my assets? Yeah.
Okay.
What am I looking to achieve from the maintenance programs for those buildings and assets? What's the time period of contracts that I'm looking to procure? And what's the longevity of those maintenance cycles? And then again, what is the budget of those contracts? Now, if I take the consultancy lens, a lot of the work, and especially at the organisation that I work at currently, but also in the past, how do we approach to support the client? So we may actually go in terms of a developer. We go and work for a developer as a client, and that developer's ask is, I need to develop a new asset for let's use a community centre, because I like the word community. Let's use a community centre.
Yes,
So
yes.
we're trying to create a new space for the community to use as a hub, a local approach. Okay, so the aspirations there from a quality perspective is all around the customer and the people that will be using that building. So what are we defining in terms of the scope? What does that community centre look like? What does it feel like? How is it going to be delivered? Then when we take the time element around our deliverables, we would look at the time. What is the time of delivering this building? And then we would look at the cost, and we would say, okay, how much budget have we got to actually develop this? And we would look at a number of different elements that we need, and I call them the scope of requirements, which would be, what resources do we need to do this? We need designers. We need a design team to come in and develop the design for that building. We need project managers to make sure that they can manage the design team throughout the longevity of the program. We need lots of other technical advisors to support quality check and make sure that actually the design team and the contractors are delivering on their promise. And we then have the contracting, the person that's going to physically get the building up and delivered. So again, that procurement strategy and the way a client, a consultant would work for the client would then mean that procurement strategy development is totally different. So that's an example of how I would approach the two different things, and hopefully that brings it to life for the audience today.
Some people tend to say that the strategy remains strategy and we cannot move with the implementation. So how could you respond to this kind of question?
You should not have a strategy without a delivery. So the ultimate aim of a strategy is to actually move into the delivery cycle. However, saying that, we have business cases. So if you're doing a business case, and actually the ask, the question, the challenge is to present the relative business case to the organisation and that cost benefits analysis, sometimes the actual recommendation might be to not move forward with it because the feasibility, return on investment isn't necessarily viable. However, if you look at a business, let's use a business looking at strategy development for procurement within a project or a program life cycle. Actually, the reason to do the strategy is to make sure that you set out the relevant parameters to be able to move it forward into that delivery stage. And really, that means that the delivery is at the heart of the strategy. And the strategy needs to talk to what you are looking to deliver. And if it doesn't translate what your aspirations are as an organization to deliver, and the means test. And I mean, the means test is really about the time, cost, quality factors, if we really simplify it in our language. That is literally what we need to articulate. And as long as you can present any relative risks and the opportunities to an organisation, it's about getting the right people on board and the right decision makers in the room in order to make the decision and move the strategy into delivery. So again, it's all around the people element. So it's about the strategy development stage is all about bringing the right people into the room, the right technical expertise, getting the right advice, testing it with the supply chain. And actually, if your strategy stacks up, then it can be delivered. So my summary to that observation would be that actually a strategy has to have an action plan and an implementation plan. And that means it can then be delivered.
So how we could respond to the audience or to the company saying that all the strategy was settled, it's already failed, and we cannot translate or we cannot move the strategy to delivery by first setting clear objectives, action plan, engage the people and doing more alignment, and also having the right resources reach to the technology point of view.
100%. That's exactly it. That is exactly where we move the strategy into delivery. It's all around outlining those fundamental principles.
Why you are taking this subject seriously and always talking about? I see you today in a conference. You are talking about this subject with more energetic way. So
Yeah.
why you select this subject specifically?
One, it's something that I'm very passionate about. And I think, again, the reason why I play those two words, strategy, delivery, is because actually, again, they need to work together. So one of the key areas that I feel is missed when we are setting out in delivering a project is actually taking the time to think about why you're doing. We ask ourselves these simple questions. Sometimes we try to overcomplicate it with different documents or submission forms, but actually ask ourselves the basic questions, which is, why are we doing this? What are we trying to achieve? How are we going to achieve it? Yeah. And actually the strategy phase allows the thinking. It allows opportunity to think about not only how has things been delivered in the past, but how do we want to deliver things in the future? So it allows those key observations. It also allows the opportunity to really look at how do you achieve outcomes. And again, going back to those metrics that I talked about, the metrics are the fundamental things that are the deciding factors. It's always about those time principles, those cost principles, and what you're trying to achieve. So for me, I'm passionate about it because it achieves results. If you're clear and you set your expectations, you write it down, you strategize, you can implement. And that front end investment can save you time at the back end.
Yes.
So definitely in the construction environment, there is a lot of time in terms of design and development. There's the REBA stages, from feasibility through to concept design, detailed design phases. Those are all the phases which are really important within that project life cycle. In setting the store and what you are buying and, how you develop things.
Yes.
And you cannot transfer that to a contractor to deliver without thinking about how do those things interact with the construction phase, but also then the operational phase. So the strategy, it looks at the whole life cycle. And if you want to make sure that you can deliver on outcomes and also within the most efficient, cost-effective and qualitative way, then you need to think about those strategy decisions at the front end. And they play into a number of different factors. Like I said, in the construction environment, how you're designing, how you're procuring, and how you're constructing, and then how, most importantly, you're handing over that asset into the operational phase.
You made it too clear to us. Imagine that you settle the strategy and there is, external environment, like, for example, putting the tariff now at the moment, since we are talking about
Yeah.
it. And sometimes not only external environment that will impact your strategy, even internal. For example, you are trying to put in your strategy applying a certain ERP system, certain technology, but you will face some difficulties. You will not achieve the target within quarter one. Maybe you will achieve it with quarter three. So there is challenges externally to your corporate, and there is a challenges internally, like resistance change and all this stuff. How we could deal with that in the strategy?
I think it's about understanding those stakeholders. It's about understanding the challenges and the risks, and it's about coming up with proactive ways of managing those. Now, actually, one of the most crucial parts of any strategy documentation is to actually assess your risks. And sometimes those are, they can be things from the external environment, like, the impact of certain tariffs. How are they going to impact your pricing and your commercial positions? They can be, again, in the construction environment, let's make it relative, planning applications of site-specific approvals. These things are challenges. They're not barriers. And that's the difference. It's, okay, you have a barrier, you'll have a challenge. How do you approach it? What mitigations can you put in place? How can you potentially support to remove some of said challenges or risks by approaching it in a certain way, advancing discussions, engagements, buying a service or a contract earlier to give you further information and maturity of content and material that will give you the informed decision and how you manage risk. So for me, it's around managing those internal and external interfaces, managing the messages, managing the communications, and then coming up with solutions to be able to manage those throughout the process. So manage. I think it's all about the way we approach and the way that we manage these different areas.
Yes, I believe also the management, and since we are talking about manage, also I believe it's required adaptability and also flexibility, because sometimes the strategy shouldn't be fixed. You have to modify it, you have to edit it. This is similar to Nokia story. So they isolate themselves, they didn't update the strategy, they lose the market.
Yeah, the market share.
Yes.
Definitely. I think you have to be always responsive to your target market and audience, right? And actually, part of a procurement professional's role is to make sure that you're ahead of that in making decisions. If I give you an example, again, working within the construction environment, there are always changes. We always have to respond to changes, because it might be that, there's something in the ground that we didn't know about, that we need to think about, where, the location. We need to think about logistics. We need to think about other external interfaces. We need to think about approvals and permits.
A lot of things.
100%. There are so many different factors.
And the approval hierarchy sometimes hold 20 signature.
There you go, 20 signatures, governance and decision making. Sometimes not everything comes to surface at the time that you expect. And so therefore you do need to be flexible and proactive and, energized. And I think one of the really big areas is around the positive solution focus, and really be able to create an environment where it's open conversations so that you get ahead of problems that are coming the way, that you can try and forecast certain things that may get to you. You can predict and look at different ways of managing said risks. So it's all about when and how you get information, to be honest. And, I think create an environment in particular, not just within your internal, but with your client and also with your end supply chain, having more open conversations and collaborative relationships is really where these big successful projects are going to be delivered.
Yes, since we are talking about strategy, becoming proactive rather than reactive, what's the future hold?
I think the future holds a lot of success. And that success is really going to be driven by the people and the way we leverage the knowledge and the experience of people. I think the communities that are being created, and especially here, having worked in Saudi Arabia for nearly 2 years now, I've learned a lot from people, and also been able to be part of different conversations across a number of different developments. And one of the things that is, is really coming to the forefront now in the current market is that there's been a lot of learning, and there is a lot of new things, but there's also a lot of old things that have already come to pass, that have already been delivered, that have already been executed. So now I feel like we're in more of a stable, phase where we need to look and reflect and learn from lessons, and then be able to use those to really transform the next phase, the next future. And definitely within the procurement space, we are in one of those professions where we can support and enhance strategies being developed at all levels, at an organisation's portfolio level, at an organisation's programme level, and then on the ground in project level.
Mhm. Another thing, we are living in a world that volatile, up and down.
Yeah.
It is not stable. The people think that we are after COVID. We are waiting just to have more stable. Now another storm become about the tariff and all this kind of stuff. So we have to live in a situation that the supply chain should deal with this up and down volatile storm. So, from lesson learned point of view, how we could include that in the strategy?
I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that actually there will always be fluctuations in life.
Yes,
And
totally
actually,
agree.
this is just the universe. And, we have to be sensitive to certain areas. You mentioned, war and things that aren't,
Unexpected.
sometimes unexpected, but also, we cannot necessarily influence or manage those situations. So I feel like we have to be responsive, and also we have to listen and understand what is happening, and really talk to the supply chain in a proactive way around that. So, I link it back again. Everything really goes down to people and communication. It's being having those discussion. It's being aware, and then it's also collaborating across larger portfolios so that challenges become opportunities for macro environmental solutions. And when we talk about tactical procurement solutions, how do we purchase things, materials, components? How do we go about that? How do we achieve success as a collective? I think that's really where we've got to go and manage, the unknowns that by the way will always come our way. But if we're proactive, if you've got the right people in the room, and we take lessons learned in history, then we can succeed.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you have any advice, any recommendation as a final word to the audience?
I think just being open to change and really
Wow.
embracing the profession that we have, taking all the opportunities that you can, and learning and grow as you go. That's one of my favorites. Yeah,
So open to change, huh?
exactly. Open to
Very
change.
nice statement. So at the end, we need just to let you watch the camera and
Okay.
saying our motto
Yeah.
to inspire the world.
To inspire the world.
Thank you very much.